When 9-year-old Caitlyn Yates pressed herself into the far corner of the girls' bathroom at Ridgecrest Elementary in Tucson, Arizona, pulled out the old smartphone her father had given her for emergencies, and called him during her lunch break to whisper that the same man had been parked outside the chain-link fence watching the playground for the third day in a row, her father, Raymond Yates, did not tell her she was imagining things. He did not tell her to go find a teacher and let the adults handle it. He did not pause to consider whether a 9-year-old's instincts were worth disrupting his afternoon. He asked her one question. He asked her where exactly the man was parked right now. And when Caitlyn pressed her face to the narrow bathroom window and told him the white pickup truck was still there on the service road that ran along the east side of the school grounds, its engine running, the driver's face turned toward the playground fence, the same way it had been on Monday, and the same way it had been on Tuesday. Raymond Yates told his daughter to stay inside, told her he loved her, ended the call, and within 40 seconds was strapping on his helmet and rolling his Road King out of the open bay of the motorcycle repair shop, where he had spent the last 11 years turning wrenches and building a quiet life from the wreckage of a louder one. Raymond was 49 years old, lean and sun-darkened from a lifetime in the Arizona desert, with a thick, dark beard going silver at the jaw, and hands that carried the permanent stain of engine grease no matter how thoroughly he scrubbed them at the end of a shift. He had grown up in Tucson, left it for the Army at 18, come back at 26 carrying things he didn't talk about at dinner, and a mechanical aptitude that turned out to be the one skill that transferred cleanly from military life to civilian work. He had learned to fix engines under pressure in places where the cost of getting it wrong was immediate and final, and that education made him extraordinarily good at his job and extraordinarily calm in situations that caused other people to freeze. He had been a member of the Desert Sentinel's MC for 11 years, joining the year after he opened the shop, when a customer who rode with the club invited him to a community event, and Raymond had looked around the room at a group of veterans and tradespeople and working men who had found in each other the kind of structure and purpose that civilian life rarely offered, and had recognized something he had been missing without knowing what to call it. The Desert Sentinels were not a large club. They had 2 chapters in southern Arizona and a reputation built on consistent presence rather than spectacle. They ran blood drives and organized supply collections after wildfire seasons and showed up to help when a member's family hit a crisis. Raymond had been their road captain for 4 years. His daughter Caitlyn lived with her mother, Donna, across town during the school week. Raymond had her every weekend and on alternating holidays, and the arrangement had settled into something workable after the difficult years that followed the divorce. Caitlyn was a serious child, observant in the way that children sometimes are when they have learned that paying attention is how you navigate a world that does not always explain itself clearly. She had her father's eyes, dark and steady, and her mother's precision with language. When she told you something, she had already thought about it. The old smartphone had been Raymond's idea 3 years ago, a prepaid device with exactly 4 numbers saved in it, her mother, her maternal grandmother, her father, and 911, given to her with a single instruction that he had repeated enough times that she could recite it back to him word for word. If something feels wrong, you call. You do not wait to be sure. You do not decide you might be overreacting. You call and let the person on the other end help you figure out what comes next. He had not known when he gave her that phone and that instruction whether the moment would ever come. He had hoped it would not. He had made sure she knew what to do in case it did. And on a Wednesday afternoon in the 3rd week of October, with the temperature still sitting at 84 degrees and the lunch period winding down at Ridgecrest Elementary, his daughter had done exactly what he taught her to do. She had noticed something that did not feel right. She had noticed it on Monday when she saw the white truck idling on the service road during afternoon recess and told herself it was probably just a maintenance vehicle. She had noticed it again on Tuesday when the same truck was in the same approximate spot during the same approximate window of time, and the driver had not gotten out and had not appeared to be doing anything except watching. And the feeling that had started as mild unease had sharpened into something she could not dismiss. And on Wednesday, she had taken Destiny Martinez, her closest friend since 2nd grade, into the girls' bathroom during the lunch break, and she had called her father. Raymond called 911 before he reached the end of his block. He gave the dispatcher his name and his daughter's name, and the name of the school and the location of the truck as Caitlyn had described it. The service road along the east perimeter fence, white pickup, late model, king cab, engine running, driver remaining in the vehicle. He told her his daughter had reported the same truck in the same location on Monday and Tuesday, and that today made 3 consecutive days. He told her he was riding to the school and gave his license plate number and described his motorcycle and what he was wearing. The dispatcher confirmed units were being dispatched and asked him clearly to observe only and not to approach the subject vehicle. Raymond said he understood. He said it without hesitation, and he meant it as completely as he was capable of meaning anything, which was to say, he meant it right up until the moment the situation required something different from him, and he suspected both he and the dispatcher understood that without either of them needing to say so out loud. He took a route that brought him in from the north, coming down the gradual slope that fed into the service road from the upper end, which allowed him to approach without passing the school's main entrance, and without giving a driver watching his mirrors from the south end of the road much warning. The service road was a narrow strip of aging asphalt, barely wide enough for 2 vehicles, bordered on the school side by the chain-link fence and on the outer side by a long, dense row of oleander that gave the road a secluded, overlooked quality. It was the kind of place that existed in the infrastructure of institutional buildings without anyone thinking much about it. Maintenance workers used it occasionally. Parents did not. Raymond crested the slope and saw the truck immediately. It was exactly as Caitlyn had described it. White, king cab, a dented rear panel on the driver's side, Arizona plates. The engine was running. The driver was behind the wheel, and his body was partially turned toward the passenger side, which put his face angled toward the fence and the playground beyond it. From where Raymond had stopped his bike at the top of the road, he could see children on the playground through the chain link. He could see the easy visibility the driver had from that position. He could see the distance between the truck and the section of fence closest to the main play structure, which was not very far at all. He sat still on his motorcycle with the engine off and called Caitlyn. She answered before the second ring. She was still in the bathroom. Destiny was with her. Raymond kept his voice even and unhurried the way he had learned to keep it in situations where the steadiness of the voice was itself a form of help. He told her the truck was there and the police were coming and that she had done exactly the right thing. He told her to walk quietly to the main office and speak directly to the front desk secretary and tell her that her father had called the police about a man watching the school from the service road on the east side. He told her to use those words specifically, because specific words moved adults to action faster than vague ones. He told her to stay away from windows on the east side of the building. He told her that Destiny should come with her because nobody should walk through a hallway alone right now. Caitlyn said she was scared. Raymond told her that being scared meant her instincts were working correctly and that her instincts had been working correctly since Monday, and that he was proud of her for trusting them. Then he told her to go, and he heard the soft sound of sneakers on tile as she moved. He kept his eyes on the truck. The driver had not reacted to his presence at the top of the road. At this distance, with the oleander pressing close on both sides, Raymond on a stationary bike with his engine off was easy to miss. He called Ellis, his road captain, a man named Ellis Pryor, who had been riding with the Desert Sentinels for 14 years and who had a particular gift for absorbing a situation clearly and responding to the parts that mattered without requiring the parts that didn't. Raymond told him where he was and what was happening, and that he had a truck penned against the south end of the service road, and that the police were inbound, but he did not know their ETA. Ellis asked one question. He asked whether Raymond needed someone there. Raymond said he did not know yet, but that it would not hurt for Ellis to be heading in this general direction and to let a couple of the other brothers know what was happening. Ellis said he would make some calls. Raymond thanked him and ended the call and sat very still on the cracked asphalt at the top of the service road and watched the white truck and listened for sirens. He heard them at 3 minutes and 40 seconds, which was how long it had been since he parked. 2 separate tones converging from different directions, still several blocks out but growing. The driver in the white truck heard them too. Raymond saw it happen in real time through the truck's rear window, the slight shift in the silhouette as the man straightened in his seat, the pause, the decision being made. The reverse lights came on. The truck began rolling backward toward Raymond's end of the road. Raymond started his engine. He did not experience it as a deliberate choice in the way that deliberate choices usually feel. It was more like the completion of something that had already begun when Caitlyn called him 40 minutes ago, a chain of events that had its own momentum now and required him simply to be the next link in it. He rolled the Road King forward down the slope and stopped it diagonally across the service road, directly in the truck's path, and cut the engine and put down the kickstand and stood beside the bike with his arms at his sides and his feet planted and his face completely still. The truck stopped. Its reverse lights stayed on for a long moment while the driver appeared to reassess. Then they went off. The truck sat there, engine idling, the driver unmoving, as two Tucson Police Department cruisers came fast over the crest of the slope from the north and braked to hard stops 30 feet from the scene, their light bars painting the oleander in alternating blue and red. Raymond raised both hands immediately and held them open and away from his body where every officer could see them clearly, and he kept them there while one officer moved toward the driver's side of the truck and a second approached Raymond at a measured pace with her hand resting near her sidearm. Raymond identified himself before she could ask. He told her his name and that he was the father who had made the 911 call and that he was the registered owner of the motorcycle. He told her his daughter was a student at the school and had reported this vehicle to him by phone during her lunch period. He told her as concisely as he could what Caitlyn had seen and when she had first seen it and what she had told him today. The officer listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she asked him to remain where he was and went to assist her partner. The driver's door opened. A man in his mid-40s stepped out onto the asphalt, both hands visible above the doorframe, wearing a gray polo shirt and work pants, and an expression that Raymond recognized from years of observing people under pressure. It was the expression of someone who had been caught in a position they had prepared an explanation for, and was now rapidly deciding which version of the explanation to lead with. He was heavy-set with close-cropped hair and a thick neck, and the kind of forgettable face that would be difficult to describe accurately from memory. He spoke to the approaching officer in a tone that started out mild and helpful and confident, the tone of a man who believed he could manage what was happening. Raymond watched from beside his motorcycle and did not move. 2 more units arrived within 6 minutes. A school resource officer came up the service road from the south end on foot, having entered through the maintenance gate. Raymond could hear, faintly over the idling engines and radio traffic, the sound of the school's intercom system calling all students inside, which meant Dr. Fowler had been notified and had initiated the lockdown protocol. He felt something release slightly in his chest at that sound. The playground was being cleared. Caitlyn was already inside. Whatever was happening with the man in the gray polo shirt was now a matter for the people whose job it was to determine what had been happening and what would happen next. Raymond had done the part that was his to do. One of the officers walked back to the cruiser and spent 2 minutes on the radio. When she returned to her partner beside the truck, Raymond saw the look that passed between them. It was brief and controlled and professional, but it was not nothing. Something had come back from the system that changed the texture of the situation. Raymond did not know what it was yet. He would not know for another hour. What he knew standing on that service road with his hands finally lowered and his heart still beating hard in his chest was that his daughter had noticed something on a Monday afternoon that every adult around her had either not seen or not thought about, that she had kept noticing it and kept carrying it for 2 days without being dismissed or distracted, and that on Wednesday she had made the call that mattered. Part 2 of 2. The man in the gray polo shirt was placed in the back of a Tucson PD cruiser at 4:17 in the afternoon. Raymond watched it happen from the service road with the particular stillness of a person who's been running on adrenaline for the better part of an hour and is only now beginning to feel the weight of what that costs. A detective arrived in an unmarked sedan 12 minutes after the patrol units. A compact woman in her early 50s named Sandra Okafor, who moved through the scene with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had been doing this long enough to know that speed and rushing were not the same thing. She spoke briefly with the officers who had responded first, reviewed something on one of their tablets, and then walked over to Raymond with her badge already extended so he could read it clearly before she said a word. She thanked him for calling it in. She thanked him for positioning himself at the north end of the road before the units arrived, and she said it without any of the careful qualification that Raymond had half expected, the acknowledgement wrapped in a reminder about civilian involvement and the importance of not interfering with police response. She said it plainly, the way one professional says something true to another. Then she told him what had come back when they ran the plates. The truck was registered to a name that appeared in a national database maintained by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, connected to an ongoing investigation being conducted jointly by the Tucson field office of the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Department. She could not give him specifics. She told him she could tell him that his daughter's 3 days of careful observation and her decision to make that phone call had placed a person of significant interest at a specific location at a specific and documentable time, and that this was the kind of information that moved investigations forward in ways that months of other work sometimes could not. Raymond stood with that for a moment. He thought about Monday. He thought about Caitlyn on Monday afternoon, noticing a white truck and feeling something she could not name clearly enough to report, and deciding to file it away. He thought about Tuesday, the same truck, the same position, the same unease sharpening into something with more definition. He thought about the adults who had been present at that school on Monday and Tuesday, teachers on playground supervision duty, the resource officer who walked the perimeter twice a day, maintenance staff who used this road. He was not thinking about it with anger. He was thinking about it the way he thought about a diagnostic problem in the shop, trying to understand what had failed and why. Because understanding failure was the only way to prevent it from happening again. A child had seen something that trained adults had not seen, not because the adults were negligent, but because the child had been looking with a particular quality of attention that came from being small in a world where small people learn very early to read the spaces around them for information that larger people have the luxury of ignoring. Detective Okafor asked if she could speak with Caitlyn at the school with Raymond present, and Raymond said yes, and they walked together through the maintenance gate and across the field to the main building where Dr. Fowler met them at the side entrance. The principal was a tall woman with natural gray hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and the composed manner of someone who had managed a school building through enough unexpected situations to have stopped being surprised by them while remaining genuinely affected by them. She had already spoken with Caitlyn and with Dana, who was driving from her office across town and would arrive within 20 minutes. She walked Raymond and the detective to the room where Caitlyn was waiting. Caitlyn was sitting at a round table in the school counselor's office with Destiny beside her and a paper cup of water in front of each of them. When Raymond came through the door, Caitlyn stood up from her chair and crossed the room to him in 4 steps and pressed her face against his chest and held on. Raymond put both arms around her and did not say anything for a long moment. There was nothing to say that was more useful than being present, and he had learned a long time ago not to fill silence with words when silence was doing important work. After a while, Caitlyn pulled back and looked up at him with those dark, steady eyes and asked if the man was gone. Raymond told her the man was with the police. He told her she was safe. He told her that what she had done had helped in ways that went beyond anything that had happened today, and that Detective Okafor was going to explain some of that to her if she felt ready to talk for a little while. Caitlyn looked at the detective, then she looked at Destiny. Then she straightened her shoulders in a way that reminded Raymond so precisely of a gesture he had seen in the mirror before difficult situations that it briefly took his breath away. She said she was ready. Detective Okafor sat down at the table across from the 2 girls and spoke to them with a directness and respect that Raymond noted and appreciated. She did not soften the conversation into something condescending or vague. She told Caitlyn that what she had done required real courage, not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. She told her that reporting something uncomfortable when you are not completely certain is one of the hardest things a person can do, because the risk of being wrong feels significant, and the risk of doing nothing feels easier to justify. She told her that the adults at the school and the adults in law enforcement were going to be taking a careful look at how they monitored the perimeter of the school grounds because of what Caitlyn's report had made visible, and that this review would make the school safer for every child who attended it. Caitlyn listened to all of this with her hands flat on the table and her eyes on the detective, and when it was over, she asked one question. She asked whether the man had done anything to other kids. Detective Okafor told her honestly that she could not discuss the details of an ongoing investigation, but that she could say that Caitlyn's report had come in time. In time was the phrase she used, and she let it rest there without elaboration, and Caitlyn nodded as if she understood exactly what it meant and what it had cost to make sure it was true. Donna arrived 18 minutes later, and the reunion between mother and daughter in the hallway outside the counselor's office was the kind of moment that hollows you out and fills you back up at the same time. Donna was a composed person by nature, organized and measured, someone who processed difficulty internally and presented a calm surface to the world. She came through the door, composed, and she stayed composed for approximately 4 seconds after she saw Caitlyn's face. And then she was not composed at all. And that was completely right. She held her daughter and said her name, and Caitlyn held her back. And they stood like that in the fluorescent light of the elementary school hallway, while Raymond stood a few feet away and looked at the bulletin board covered in construction paper leaves with children's handwritten thankfulness written on them in crayon, and felt the specific texture of a day that had gone the way it needed to go instead of the other way. Dinah looked at Raymond over Caitlyn's shoulder and mouthed 2 words. He nodded once. There was a history between them that was complicated, and a co-parenting relationship that had required significant effort from both of them to build into something functional, and none of that went away in a moment like this. But none of it was the most important thing in this moment either. The most important thing was the child standing between them, who had paid attention for 3 days and then made the right call and held herself together long enough for help to arrive. They had both had something to do with making her that person. That was a thing they could acknowledge without needing to say it out loud. Ellis Pryor arrived at the school parking lot at 5 o'clock with 2 other Desert Sentinels brothers, Garrett, and a man they called 6 Point, who had been with the club almost as long as Ellis. They had not been asked to come to the school. Raymond had not called them after the initial call to Ellis on the service road. They came because that was what the club did when one of their own was in the middle of something that mattered. They moved toward it without being asked, and they stayed until it was clear that staying was no longer necessary. Raymond walked out to the parking lot and found them leaning against their bikes in the late afternoon sun, and felt the particular comfort of people who understood, without needing the situation explained to them. Ellis asked if Caitlyn was all right. Raymond said she was. Garrett said that the kid sounded like her father. 6 Point, who was not a man who spoke often or without purpose, said that she had done good and that doing good was the thing. Raymond agreed that it was. They stayed in the parking lot until Dana's car pulled out with Caitlyn in the passenger seat, and Caitlyn rolled down her window as they passed the row of motorcycles and looked at the 3 bikers standing beside their machines and raised one hand in a small wave. Ellis and Garrett waved back. 6 Point gave her a slow nod that managed to contain more dignity and acknowledgement than most people could fit into a full sentence. Caitlyn smiled, and the car turned onto the street and was gone. In the weeks that followed, the investigation that Detective Okafor had referenced moved in directions that Raymond was not fully informed about and did not need to be. What he learned in fragments over the following months, through a brief follow-up call from Okafor, and later through the kind of regional news coverage that appears without identifying the children involved, was that the man in the white truck had been connected to a pattern of surveillance at schools and parks across 3 counties over a period of 14 months. The documentation of his presence at Ridgecrest Elementary on 3 specific dates, made possible by Caitlyn's reports and Raymond's 911 call with its timestamp, had provided the kind of concrete and locatable evidence that moved a long-running investigation into a phase where charges became possible. Raymond did not dwell on the details. He thought about them enough to understand their weight, and then he put them in the category of things he had done what he could about, and that were now in other hands. What he did dwell on, and what he returned to in the quiet moments between jobs at the shop, was the question of what had made the difference. Not in the tactical sense, not the logistics of the service roadblock or the timing of the dispatch or the information that came back when they ran the plates. He thought about the 3 days. He thought about a 9-year-old girl who had not been taught that her discomfort was an inconvenience, or that her unease was an overreaction, or that the right thing to do when something felt wrong was to wait until she was sure. He had given her a phone with 4 numbers and 1 instruction, and the instruction had taken root the way instructions take root when they come from someone who means them without reservation, when the child receiving them understands in her body and not just her mind that the person giving them will answer when she calls. That was the thing. he thought, not the phone, not the 4 numbers. The certainty that calling would be worth it because someone on the other end would come. The Desert Sentinels added something to their community outreach calendar the following spring. It was a workshop they ran in partnership with the Tucson Police Department's Community Liaison Office, offered free at libraries and community centers and schools that requested it. The workshop was built around a single subject. It was about teaching children how to recognize when something felt wrong, how to find a trusted adult when one was not immediately available, how to use whatever communication tools they had access to, and how to keep trying even if the first person they told did not respond the way they needed. They called it the right call, which was not a subtle name but was an accurate one. Raymond ran the sessions himself most of the time. Standing at the front of community rooms in his Desert Sentinel's vest, this weathered biker with grease-stained hands and a quiet manner, telling children and the parents who came with them that instinct was a form of intelligence and that trusting it was a skill that could be practiced and that practicing it could save a life. Caitlyn came to the first session. She sat in the front row beside Destiny and listened to her father talk about the things she already knew. And at the end of the session, when Raymond opened the floor for questions, she raised her hand. A boy in the third row asked her what it felt like to be the one who called. Caitlyn thought about it with the same careful deliberateness she brought to everything. Then she said it felt like being scared and doing the thing anyway, and that doing the thing was the part that mattered. She said her dad had told her that being scared meant your instincts were working. She said she thought that was true. Raymond looked at his daughter from the front of the room and did not trust himself to add anything to what she had said because there was nothing to add. She had said the whole thing. She had seen something on a Monday that nobody else had seen, and she had kept seeing it. And on a Wednesday, she had called and someone had answered, and that was the whole of it. That was the entire distance between what happened and what might have happened instead. One child paying attention, one parent who answered on the first ring, and the 3 days in between when a little girl carried a weight that was too heavy for her and carried it anyway, waiting for the moment she knew would come when she could finally put it down.